Today's story unfolds in New Orleans, a city that has seen much: hurricanes, ghosts, broken hearts. Even in the chaos of one of America's worst natural disasters, Hurricane Katrina, two people found each other: Addie Hall and Zack Bowen. They were young, free-spirited, and had wild tempers. While the rest of the city was flooded and devastated, they danced in the streets, drank by candlelight, and called their love the end of the world. But when the electricity was turned back on and reality set in, their love story took a dark turn. Today, the apartment where it all happened has become a stop on New Orleans ghost tours. But what exactly happened behind the door of that apartment? The question remains open to this day. Was it trauma, a madness that set in after Hurricane Katrina? Or was it something darker that had been brewing even before the storm? Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more cases. This helps us a lot. Thank you. On Tuesday, October 17th, 2006, a New Orleans detective, Tom Moravich, arrived at a parking lot in the heart of the French Quarter. There, he discovered the body of a man who had jumped from the roof. Searching the pockets for identification documents, the officer found a small plastic bag with a tag that read the name Zachary Bowen. Also in the pocket was a folded piece of paper with the inscription, "Police Only." When the police unfolded the note, they read the following text: "This is no accident. I had to say goodbye to life to pay for what I took. If you send a patrol to 826 North Rampart Street, you will find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend." Detective Moravich was shocked by the note, but what awaited the police at the specified address went beyond their imagination. The apartment was in an unbelievable mess. Boxes of things were piled everywhere, and all table surfaces were littered with empty beer cans. On the walls, the words "I loved her" and "Please help me get rid of the pain" were written in black spray paint. And one more message: "Call my wife." When the police began searching the apartment, they discovered something horrifying. They realized that something very personal and very dark had happened there. To understand what happened, one must go back about 10 years. So, in early 1996, 17-year-old Zachary Bowen went on a cross-country trip through the southern states with his father. Zach was a charming but somewhat frivolous youth who had lived with his mother after his parents' divorce. As he got older, the young man went to live with his father for a while. The two of them went on a trip and, passing through New Orleans, Louisiana, fell so much in love with the place that they decided to stay there for a while. Zach enrolled in high school, but then dropped out. When the young man turned 18, he got a job at a local bar on the busy Bourbon Street in the French Quarter. That was where the city's nightlife was in full swing. Bourbon Street was home to many bars, live music played, and the delicious aromas of fresh food lured crowds of people there. One evening while at work, Zach met 26-year-old Lana Shupak, originally from Texas. Lana had been very independent from a young age. She worked as a dancer and, like Zach, often moved from place to place. Lana had come to New Orleans on vacation with friends. After meeting Zach, she quickly found a common language with him, and their relationship developed rapidly. After returning to Texas, Lana and Zach spoke frequently on the phone. Eventually, the young man convinced the girl to return and said they should live together. The lovers rented a small apartment and could not get enough of each other's company. But then, Zach confessed that he was only 18 years old. Lana, who had already turned 27, was shocked to learn her boyfriend's real age. The guy was tall and looked older than his years. Additionally, he worked in a bar, so the girl assumed he must be at least 21 years old. But things got even worse when she realized she was pregnant and their relationship began to crumble. In the end, Lana moved out, considering Zach still too young to become a father. She did not spread word of the pregnancy and decided to care for the future baby alone. On July 13th, 1997, Lana gave birth to a boy. The child was 1 month old when she realized she couldn't cope. Eventually, Lana asked a friend to call Zach and tell him about the baby. About an hour after the call, Zach held his son for the first time. The little boy completely transformed his consciousness. He made a promise to pull himself together and become a good father. Shortly after, Zach rented an apartment for his family in a good neighborhood. He began taking more shifts at work to provide for Lana and his son, and finally began to take everything more seriously. Everything was going its course until Zack was arrested. Police found him with a homemade bong, a smoking device made from an aluminum Coca-Cola can. Zack assured the officers that the can belonged to his friend, but the detectives did not believe him. The charges against Zack were only dropped after his friend appeared at the police station and confirmed that it was indeed his can. Although everything ended well for Zack, this event shook his self-confidence. He felt fear and began to doubt his actions. Zack desperately wanted to become a good, respected person, a caring husband, and a father. Not knowing how to proceed, he turned to his older brother, who was in the military, for advice. His brother advised him to enlist in the army, claiming it would provide confidence, keep him out of trouble, and help support his family. The idea seemed tempting to Zack, but he did not yet have a high school diploma, so joining the army had to be postponed for a while. In 1998, Zack turned 19 and proposed to Lana. They were raising a son and truly loved each other, so they considered starting a family a necessary step for their joint future. They married that same year, and in June 1999, they had a second child. Becoming a father of two made Zack think seriously about his life. He enrolled in a general educational development program, passed the exam, and received his diploma. Having completed all the necessary documents for military service, Zack signed an 8-year contract and went to basic training in May 2000. After training, Bowen was sent to his first duty station in Gießen, Germany. This was a kind of home base for soldiers between deployments. Lana and the children did not go with him, giving him time to settle in. They stayed in New Orleans, then followed Zack's first serious assignment. He was sent to Kosovo, which was recovering from war destruction. Zack's unit participated in a NATO peacekeeping mission. The work was extremely difficult. Zack was assigned to help open mass graves, carefully extract bodies, pack them in bags, and send them for identification. This required not only physical, but also moral strength. One day, while Zack was resting from work, he met a little girl on the street and gave her a candy. It was a simple, small act of kindness. But the next day, the young man learned that the little girl had been executed by opposing forces for talking to an American soldier. This event became one of Zack's first serious traumas abroad. From then on, those around him began to notice changes occurring in him. He became quieter, more withdrawn, and signs of depression began to manifest. This was later identified as post-traumatic stress disorder. But at the time, it seemed like something incomprehensible. Zack Bowen was a large guy, about 2 meters tall, and wore size 47 shoes. At that time, the army did not make boots that size, so he had to wear smaller shoes, which of course led to foot deformation. Eventually, Zack's feet began to hurt unbearably, and he started wearing tennis shoes. By the time the army made him custom-ordered boots, the limb damage was already irreversible, and Zack required surgery. Meanwhile, Lana and the children were still in New Orleans. Her husband sent her a pile of documents so she could fill them out and move to the base with him. Lana said she was tired from work and raising children alone, so she didn't have time to fill out the papers. So, Zack had surgery on his feet and was given sick leave. He went to New Orleans to spend time with his family and finally complete the necessary paperwork. When it came time to return to Germany, his family went with him, 2 children and Lana. This happened just before the September 11th, 2001. Tragedy occurred in the USA when 2 passenger planes hijacked by terrorists crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. After that, Zack and his squad were sent to Iraq, where they participated in active combat operations. Bowen saw his friends dying and being wounded. It was unbearable, and he didn't even have time to process what was happening. Then, Zack learned that a small Iraqi boy, whom he had been teaching English, was caught in a bombing. The entire family perished. This was another instance where innocent communication turned into tragedy. Bowen felt as if there was only death around him. It was hard not to lose his composure. To top it all off, information reached Zack that soldiers from another squad had brutally tortured prisoners. This caused him disgust and made him doubt everything he thought he was fighting for. His post-traumatic disorder intensified, and in November 2003, Zack returned to Germany a completely different person. The outgoing, cheerful guy turned into a withdrawn, silent type. During the following year, Bowen was in Germany. But everything he saw and experienced in the war left a deep mark on his soul. Over time, a hatred for military service began to grow in the man, and he intentionally made small mistakes to annoy those around him. This led to Zack eventually being discharged from the Army without being provided veteran benefits, life insurance, housing assistance, or medical care. Nothing. When Lana learned of the discharge, she got angry, packed her things, and left for America, leaving the children and her husband in Germany. The children were in school, and Zack wanted them to finish the semester, so he stayed with them until December 2004, and then they all returned to New Orleans. By that point, Lana had started dating an old friend. She no longer wanted Zack near her, so he stayed in a hotel while looking for permanent housing. The former soldier withdrew into himself even more. He told no one, not even his own mother, about what he had experienced in Iraq or what was happening in his family life. He just kept it all inside. Time passed. Zack turned 27, and he again found work as a bartender in the French Quarter, gradually becoming himself again, a cheerful, carefree, and pleasant guy people liked. Zack worked the night shift, and his sincere smile often attracted the attention of women. That was how he met 29-year-old Addie Hall, a colleague who worked the morning shift in the same bar. Addie was from North Carolina. Friends described her as a creative and free-spirited nature. Addie danced, painted, wrote poetry, and loved to travel. She dropped out of high school to become a dance teacher. In 2002, Addie went to New Orleans with friends and sincerely fell in love with the city. The amazing energy, crazy nightlife, and incredible atmosphere of New Orleans hooked her so much that she decided to stay there forever. However, there was a dark side to the creative Addie. When she drank or got high, she became angry and aggressive. The girl could easily lash out at strangers or start insulting her friends. She also carried an unloaded pistol in her purse and would sometimes take it out to scare those around her. At one point, Addie got into a toxic relationship where there was violence, and since then, she was cautious about choosing a boyfriend. So, in 2005, 29-year-old Addie Hall worked the morning shift in the same bar where Zack worked. It was not love at first sight. Addie thought Zack was somewhat dim-witted and predictable, but after some time, she began to notice that her thoughts kept returning to Bowen. Zack often stayed after his shift to talk to the daytime bartender, and their conversations gradually grew into something more. They began to get closer and open up to each other. Addie liked Zack more and more, and he could no longer imagine himself without Addie. Days went by, and soon the young people officially started dating. However, Zack forgot to tell his new girlfriend that formally he was still married and had 2 children. Obviously, this was a real shock for her. After experiencing a flash of anger, Addie still decided to continue the relationship. A few weeks after their romance began, tragedy struck: Hurricane Katrina. In late August 2005, meteorologists predicted that the storm would reach New Orleans and be classified as a Category 3 hurricane. Although this caused concern, authorities did not consider the threat critical and did not declare a mandatory evacuation. However, the forecast soon changed. The hurricane intensified rapidly and quickly reached Category 5. Officials urgently announced a mandatory evacuation order for the population of New Orleans and surrounding areas. Experts realized that delay could lead to a catastrophe. Zack's ex-wife and mother of his 2 children, Lana, concerned about the approaching hurricane, called her husband in a panic. She suggested evacuating together since she did not have a car. Lana was counting on Zack's help, but he refused. Instead, he decided to stay with Addie in her apartment in the French Quarter and wait out the storm. The French Quarter was located on high ground, so many local residents planned to stay in their homes until the end of the hurricane, considering it safe. Zack and Addie decided to do the same, and Lana was upset. She felt that Zack had put his relationship with his new girlfriend above the safety and well-being of his children, so she had no choice but to also stay in the city with the children and wait out the storm. On August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana. Wind speeds exceeded 240 kilometers per hour. The measures taken to protect New Orleans proved ineffective. The levees that were supposed to protect the city failed, and after a few hours, 80% of the city was underwater. The destruction was colossal. Entire blocks were flooded. More than 200,000 homes were destroyed. About 1,800 people died. Electricity went out and cell service barely worked. People did everything possible to survive. When the storm ended, Lana took the children and left for Texas. She tried to contact Zach, but without success. After several days of silence, the woman decided that he had not survived. The French Quarter suffered less than the rest of the city, but there too, there was still no electricity or mobile service. Zach and Addie took refuge in her apartment. The chaos reigning around brought them closer than ever. After the storm, they helped neighbors, cleared debris, and chopped down fallen trees. Soon, the survivors in the neighborhood formed their own small community. They gathered together, held picnics on the street, creating the feeling of a large family. For Zach and Addie, it was an exciting time. They had no work, no bills, no responsibility, and they liked it. They hung out almost every day, used illegal drugs, slept on a mattress they brought out to the street, listened to music from a small radio, and enjoyed a life detached from the rest of the country. The couple even managed to interest journalists with their behavior. An article in the New York Times stated that Addie Hall and Zachary Bowen from the French Quarter had found an unusual way to ensure regular patrolling of their street by law enforcement officers. Miss Hall attracted the attention of police cars by flashing her breasts. Eventually, rescue teams and army units arrived in the city, ready to clear debris and conduct additional evacuations. When Zach saw the soldiers, it triggered many memories he was trying to forget. His post-traumatic stress disorder began to manifest again, and the carefree, happy little world he had built with Addie cracked. When other residents began returning to the city, Zach and Addie felt irritation. They didn't even want to think about having to go to work again and perform duties. While everyone else was trying to return to normal life in the city, Zach and Addie hoped everything would stay as it was. About a month later, when life in the city returned to its usual rhythm, the couple realized they needed to find work. Zach got a job at a grocery store, and Addie started her job as a bartender. When Lana and the children returned to New Orleans and learned that Zach was alive and well, she was furious. While she mourned her ex-husband and looked for ways to feed her children, he was simply enjoying life in the ruined city with his new girlfriend. Lana and Zach met, and she told him that she was barely making ends meet and that she needed financial help. The spouses agreed that Zach would start paying child support and would take the children every weekend. Addie, learning of Zach's meeting with his ex-wife, became very angry. She felt that Lana was interfering in their lives, and Addie didn't like it. When the children came to visit their father, the woman refused to interact with them and simply left the apartment, often returning home drunk and locking herself in the bathroom. Eventually, Addie told Zach that the children could no longer stay in her apartment, and from then on, meetings with their father took place in a hotel room. Many friends said that this was the beginning of the end. Despite the fact that Addie and Zach returned to work, they did not stop throwing parties. Both used illegal drugs from time to time, and the bad habit was turning into a serious addiction. Before the couple realized it, they had managed to spend hundreds of dollars on white powder. Obviously, the pills and booze made their arguments more explosive. By the spring of 2006, the young people were breaking up and getting back together almost every day. Zach became insanely jealous of Addie because of her work as a bartender. He felt the girl was intentionally flirting with customers. Because of this, their arguments escalated into physical violence. One evening after a major fight, Zach told friends he had had enough and that he had broken up with Addie. The man went to his children, leaving a note saying he was leaving forever. Unfortunately, this did not last long. Soon, Zach changed his mind because these two were literally addicted to each other. After a few weeks of separation, he returned and immediately headed to Addie's. And they again began using illegal substances, drinking alcohol, and arguing. But now Zach was constantly losing control of himself and arguing not just with his girlfriend, but with everyone in sight. Addie was no better. One night, she got into a fight with a random guy on the street, pulled out a pistol, and pointed it at his face. The young man called the police, and Addie was arrested for assault with a firearm, possession of weed, and illegal substances. Zach did not post bail for her, leaving Addie behind bars. But as soon as she was released, she immediately returned to him. One night during another argument, Addie kicked Zack out, and he started pounding on the door, swearing and calling her the worst names possible. Neighbors called the police, and Zack was arrested. He spent 2 days in jail until Addie posted bail for him. These two were stuck in the grip of a dangerous, toxic obsession with each other. They could not be near each other, but separation for them was like death. The situation worsened when Zack admitted that he was bisexual and had started a relationship with a man. Addie exploded, and they had a very big fight. The woman called her boyfriend every name in the book, then stole his mobile phone and deleted all his contacts. And she started telling Zack's friends that he had AIDS. At one point, Addie had a dispute with her landlord, and she suggested Zack move. They found an apartment on North Rampart Street in the French Quarter that was located on the very roof. The landlord, Leo, gave them a tour and said it was the perfect place for lovers. The couple liked the new housing, and they made a verbal agreement to rent it. Zack gave Leo $1,500, and the landlord gave them the key. 2 days later, Addie went to the landlord's office and asked him for a written lease agreement that would list only her name. Addie wanted to take revenge on Zack for his infidelity and finally break off their relationship. She and Leo quickly drew up the contract and signed it. In the early morning of October 5th, 2006, when Zack returned home from work, Addie told him what she had done. The man immediately realized he had been used to get the apartment. As a result, the couple had a massive fight. Addie was throwing Zack's things out of the apartment, calling him a loser and reminding him of his affair with a man. He, in turn, was bringing the things back in and insulting Addie in response. This could have gone on forever if Zack hadn't exploded at some point. He couldn't take it anymore. The only thing he wanted was for Addie to be quiet. Wrapping his hands around his beloved woman's neck, he squeezed until Addie's body went limp. When the realization of what he had done set in, Zack was horrified. The man did not know what to do next. Trying to calm down, he sat down, took Addie's diary, and began writing what had happened. She stole this apartment, asked Leo. She tried to kick me out, but I strangled her. I did it calmly. After I desecrated the body several times, the question arose of how to get rid of the corpse. This was how Zack explained his act on the pages of the diary. At work, they immediately noticed something was wrong with Bowen. He looked terrible. To one colleague, Zack said that Addie had left him and returned to North Carolina. But everyone knew perfectly well that breakups in the pair occurred almost daily, so they didn't even pay attention to the man's words. In the diary, Zack left another entry stating that out of laziness, he had spent the whole weekend in bars with different girls, pumping himself with white powder until he was overcome by a sense of guilt for what he had done. Later, the full horror of the situation finally began to dawn on him. Bowen's plan was to spend all his cash and then kill himself. It began with a 9-day bender. Zack went to bars and strip clubs, used a bunch of illegal drugs, and constantly changed women. On October 14th, the smell of his home became unbearable. Zack turned the air conditioner on full blast, turning the apartment into a refrigerator to somehow stop the decomposition of the dead body. At some point, when Zack ran out of money, he realized that everything was coming to an end. Bowen spray-painted messages on the walls of the apartment, then sat down and wrote a suicide note, marking it only for police. 12 days after Addie's death, Zack went to a rooftop bar at a hotel in the French Quarter. He ordered a couple of drinks and chatted a bit with the bartender. Then, he walked to the edge of the building and began pacing back and forth near the railing. His behavior looked suspicious, but the bar staff decided he was going to run off without paying the bill. As soon as they were distracted by other patrons, Zack simply vanished. Seizing the moment, Zachary Bowen climbed over the railing in the blink of an eye and stepped into the abyss. He jumped from the roof of the 7th floor and fell to his death, putting an end to all his torment. When police arrived at the scene, the first thing they did was search the victim's pockets to identify him, and they found the note that led them to the apartment. Looking around, they noticed the spray-painted inscriptions on the walls, and then they discovered 2 pots on the kitchen stove. In one of them, under a lid, lay a human head, and in the other pot were hands. It all looked as if someone was going to cook soup. In the oven, in a large turkey roasting pan on a tray, lay pieces of roasted meat. These were legs. The torso was kept in the refrigerator in a large trash bag. It was likely the most disturbing scene the police had seen at a crime site. During the search of the apartment, detectives also stumbled upon the diary where Zack Bowen described what happened. After law enforcement officers called Lana and told her what happened, she did not believe the father of her children was capable of such atrocities. Her faith was shaken when friends and relatives blew up her phone, trying to convince her not to watch the news. Since the main figures in the case were dead, Bowen's family and friends tried to figure everything out on their own. They believed Zack had held a lot inside: the deployment, the loss of fellow soldiers, the death of innocent people, the failed marriage, Hurricane Katrina. All of this strongly affected him, and then he met Addie and became obsessed with her. Illegal substances, alcohol, and arguments seemed to simply push him over the edge and became the final drop in the bucket of patience. Zack's family took his body and organized a quiet cremation. His ashes were given to Lana and the children. As for Addie's body, it is not clear where or how she was buried, because it took several months before her family contacted the police station. This tragic story that shocked New Orleans became the basis for a book titled "Shake the Devil Off" by Ethan Brown, and people who learned of the romance of Addie Hall and Zachary Bowen seemed to go crazy. The media dubbed Zack with nicknames like Butcher Bowen, the Katrina Cannibal, and others. And New Orleans residents made t-shirts with the inscription, "Nothing says love like my girlfriend in the oven." Most likely, both Addie and Zack suffered from mental health issues. The man likely had post-traumatic stress disorder. But, unfortunately, it so happened that as a combat veteran, he did not receive the necessary help. Instead, the tragic story grew with rumors that Zack was a cannibal, although the medical examiner found no confirmation of this. Zack and Addie's apartment has become a kind of stop on popular ghost tours in New Orleans. Now it is a real tourist attraction. People can go there and leave their offerings in the kitchen: cigarettes, booze, money, drawings. It is believed these gifts are made in honor of the lost souls of Zack and Addie. And some even claim they have seen the ghosts of the two lovers in the apartment. If you are finished watching, you're a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give it a like. See you in the next video.